and share it so that folks can join that event as well if they would like to. As always, our celebration is an hour. We will wrap up around 8 p.m. on the East Coast, including time for our traditional dance number at the end. To get started and demonstrate that we continue to grow in our usage of technology, we are beginning with a poll to discover who's joining us this evening and your relationship to ALFA. So Belle, if you would launch the poll now for attendees so they can figure out how to answer it. The question is very simple. Were you an ALFA member? While you're doing the poll, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sinister Wisdom. In case you're not familiar with Sinister Wisdom, it is a quarterly journal of lesbian literature and art. Since 2012, in collaboration with the Southern Lesbian Feminist Activist Herstory Project, we've published 6 volumes dedicated to telling the stories unearthed by the Herstory Project. The first one was Sinister Wisdom 93. This is actually the last single issue that I have available in the office. It is still available in the box sets. And the 6th and final issue is Sinister Wisdom 124, which was just released this April. All Sinister Wisdom subscribers have received them, and as I mentioned, they're now available as a box set. So if you love what you hear tonight, consider ordering the full set. Or if you have all of the issues, you can just order the box to put them in. We'll put more information about that into the chat. Finally, if you're not currently a subscriber, I encourage you to sign up for a subscription today by going to sinisterwisdom.org/subscribe. A group of monthly sustainers is vital to Sinister Wisdom. If you can give monthly, please consider signing up as a sustainer at sinisterwisdom.org/sustainers. I send out emails every month when your gift comes in with behind the scenes details and new information about what we have coming for the journal, including book recommendations. And I just read the best book of contemporary lesbian fiction that I'll be recommending to all of our sustainers in the month of July. Finally, I appreciate the many ways that lesbians lift up and support the work of Sinister Wisdom. Thank you all. Our usual housekeeping items, which I'll go through quickly. Please keep your mic muted throughout the program. If we detect noise, we will mute you. There will be an opportunity to unmute at the end and wave and cheer at the end of our program. We'll also be taking questions from the audience nearer in the last 15 minutes of the program. So if you have specific questions, please put them in the chat. You can send them directly to me or share them with the whole group. As the program proceeds, if you want to show appreciation for readers, wave your hands at the end of each reading and use the reaction emojis on Zoom. Feel free to test those now. And finally, of course, light up the chats. Sometimes the best things of our events are happening in the chat. For technical assistance this evening, chat with Belle Pitkin, who's on tap for technical assistance. Belle is also the artist behind the cover of Sinister Wisdom 125, which we'll publish in July. You're going to be getting a cover reveal email about that in the next day or two. So we are recording this event, as you all heard, and I'll make that available tomorrow or Thursday at sinisterwisdom.org/SW124. So now we begin our program, and I'm going to start out by just giving a brief overview of ALFA and a look at its founders. This overview comes from Sinister Wisdom 93, so I want to highlight that. I remind everyone that the poll is still active. We'll look at those results after this brief overview of ALFA. The Atlanta Lesbian Feminist Alliance, ALFA, was founded in 1972 by a collection of women involved in the social justice, gay liberation, and feminist movements of the time. The founders sought to create a space situated in a framework of leftist politics where they could further their feminist goals. The first ALFA house was a 2-story house in Little Five Points neighborhood in Atlanta, where several of its founding members lived. The second ALFA house, also in the Little Five Points neighborhood of Candler Park, was half of a rented duplex from 1976 through 1986 and operated as a meeting space, which was home to dozens of activities. The third ALFA house was intended to be ALFA's own, so lesbian sisters put up money for a down payment on a house needing much repair in nearby Kirkwood, which was the ALFA house until the group ended in 1994. During the organization's heyday, ALFA had around 100 members who helped produce the monthly newsletter, Atlanta, managed their library, planned social events, and played on ALFA's not one, but 2 softball teams. Many ALFA members lived together in communal houses, and others joined eating co-ops or clubs for weekly meals with other members. ALFA was incredibly involved in community organizing and activist movements within Atlanta. Members of ALFA planned the Great Southeast Lesbian Conference in 1975. They were represented on the Atlanta Gay Pride Committee and acted as representatives to anti-racist organizations such as the National Anti-Klan Network and the Black and White Men's Together Anti-Discrimination Project. It wasn't until the late 1980s that the organization's membership began to shrink. ALFA officially closed its doors in 1994 after 22 years, leaving behind an extraordinary legacy of activism, community, and change. All right, so now we're going to see who is joining us this evening, and Belle is going to reveal the poll results. So 14 of the 52 people here tonight are ALFA members. That's about a quarter of the group. 9 people did not join the group, but received the newsletter or attended a few events. And 29 people were not involved with ALFA at all. Thank you so much for sharing that and participating. Now, we would like to share some images from the founders of ALFA. So I have a little video to show you. ALFA was founded by a group of feminists that included our very own Lorraine Fontana, Diana Kay, Elaine Kolb, Vicki Gabriner, Sally Gabb, Mariana Kaufman, Helen Schleidinger, Marilyn Langfeld, Martha Lewis. These women were joined by early members such as Corrine Smith, Tish Papa, Casey Wildmoon, who you will hear from later, Peggy Cantrell, Libby Hall, Jane Black, and Janine Allen, among others. In the slideshow, you're going to see many photos of ALFA's founders and early members, but our collection is not complete. So if you have additional photos of founders or early members, please do feel free to share them with sinisterwisdom@gmail.com. And I will get them to Lorraine, who will do wonderful and amazing things with them. Now we're going to show the slideshow, the founders of ALFA. Please enjoy. We're gonna teach you, hypnotize you, try to squeeze you. We're gonna get you. Here come the lesbians. Don't go try to fight it, run away or try to hide it. We want your love and that's our plan. Here come the lesbians. Don't look in the closet. Keeping out the stairs. Slipping on behind. I'm not everywhere. I can get silly feeling, reaching up from floor to ceiling. You can't escape, there we are. Here comes the lesbian. Thank you. As you saw, that was Leaping Lesbians performed. It's on YouTube, performed by a collective of folks at, Belle, tell me the name because I'm just completely blanking on it and it's not on the script.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Who's performing Leaping Lesbians?
It's your girlfriend, I believe?
Nope.
Oh.
To think, yeah.
No, it's actually, so they're all gathered they're at Sufi,
the other one was Meg Christian then, right?
Yes, it's actually performed by the Goldenrod music staff, led by Ellis and Nedra Johnson.
Ah.
So the song is by Sue Fink, And Goldenrod was the group I wanted to mention. All right. So now I'm going to introduce Lorraine Fontana, who's going to share her memories about ALFA. She is our intrepid organizer this evening who brought us all together, and an early ALFA co-founder and member, and she is now going to make some comments. Lorraine, please join us.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. One correction. We're talking about the founders. Martha Smith, that was her last name. It was Corinne Smith also, but Martha Smith was one of the co-founders. She lives in Germany now, unfortunately, in the middle of the night for her, so she's not going to be joining us. I wanted to mainly read something from something I wrote for the Southern Lesbian Feminist Activist History Project. I think at one point we were all asked to write about, so what does Southern Lesbian Feminist Activism mean to you? And so I'm going to read little pieces of this, which will talk about kind of where I come from. First of all, Southern. I consider myself a Southern lesbian because I came out here, although I am from New York, originally New York City, so I'm a Yankee transplant. Feminism for me is a worldview that says one's biology is not one's destiny, and that one of the goals of our political organizing should be the recognition of and vanquishing of male supremacy and patriarchal thinking and institutions. Now, for me, those patriarchal institutions include white supremacy, power over based on economic class, as well as male and heterosexual supremacy. Activism, I see, is a very broad and all-encompassing term. Everything from signing on online petitions to getting arrested in a demonstration of civil disobedience. From talking with a family member or coworker who has very different views to risking one's life for a social justice cause. And one can be a at-home activist or even a from-home activist or travel around the world. As far as ALFA, ALFA's purpose and textures changed really a lot over the 22 years of its existence. Many of the women who founded ALFA brought with us experiences in other social justice movements, including the Civil Rights Movement, the Second and Third Venture Ramos Brigade, the Women's Liberation Movement, the New Left, including a couple of women who were part of the Weather Underground, and the War on Poverty. Although very intersectional in its early political analysis and the personal experiences of its founders, ALFA formed to also put into practice the then necessary critique of male privilege that many of these movements still engaged in, as well as a necessary critique of homophobia within the women's movement. We did that by forming a lesbian-only space where lesbian women could find our own power and creativity. Women who joined over the years had backgrounds and political views that varied and whose definitions of feminism varied as well. Our first newsletter started in the fall of 1973, and it reflected that ALFA had been struggling over its first year. A coordinating committee we called Scarlet was formed, and the following blurb appeared in the December 73 issue of our newsletter. Quote, ALFA welcomes all lesbians to relate to us and become part of us in whatever way you can. We do not exclude anyone on the basis of her race, religion, politics, economic status, occupation, or degree of openness. We want ALFA to reflect the diversity of the lesbian community. Some of us can afford to, and I made the decision to be out front. There are certain things that can be accomplished by these women. Others of us can't afford to be out, and there are other things to be accomplished by those women. Relate to ALFA in whatever way you can. Take what you see as valuable and interesting to you, and giving whatever you can in return. At this point, your ideas about what ALFA should devote its time to are most valuable and needed. Come to a meeting, meet other women, speak to your needs, give suggestions, or just call us. And the early ALFA House, we had a phone with an answering machine. We were there a lot of the time because the first house I lived in with many other women. So people were there. Second house, we had an answering machine. People weren't always there, but we would We would answer people when they called and left messages. Now, over the years, ALFA had very broad kind of application, and we both were a social and cultural gathering place. Like we had open houses, coffee houses, consciousness raising groups, movie nights and game nights, and we did sports, organized and otherwise. We also were kind of an incubation ground for other lesbian and feminist organizations and projects. For instance, Red Dye Theater came out of the ALFA Women. Women's Chorus had a lot of ALFA members, and they practiced at the ALFA House. Women's Writers Group, which a lot of which formed and became women rights later on in terms of connecting with other people in the Southeast. DAR2, which is Dykes for the Second American Revolution, which is a socialist feminist group. Music production companies, and even a Diana Wiccan Coven. And thirdly, ALFA was a social justice voice within both the larger feminist, LGBT, and progressive communities. So we, for instance, participated in Pride events each year, and sometimes we would help organize those. We joined the ERA coalition that was fighting to pass the ERA in Georgia. We sponsored reading and discussion groups on issues like racism, raising children, addiction, and recovery. We supported lesbian mother custody cases, and that was early on, that was a big part of the legal battles that were being fought in family law. And we joined coalitions to defeat class and race divisions within our communities. We sent ALFA reps. I was one of those who, and so was Maria, people who would be willing to work with men. So we worked outside in coalition groups in efforts to protest issues such as police brutality and anti-Klan organizing. And, you know, it was already mentioned, we had the 75 Great Southeast Lesbian Conference, over 500 women attended that. And we also helped plan and coordinate the 1991 first ever National Lesbian Conference in Atlanta. So you see, there was a lot of things that happened in the South that usually are not recognized by people in other places. And last thing I'll say is when I first got connected was because I had come down to Atlanta in '68 as part of the War on Poverty to be a VISTA worker, a community organizer. And I loved Atlanta so much, I decided to move back here when I was going to graduate school. And I figured I'd be in Atlanta again. Well, I dropped out of graduate school in 71, 72, and when ALFA was formed. And there were a group of women who had been, like I said, from New Left organizations, a lot from anti-war, from the civil rights movement, from the War on Poverty, anti-imperialist movement. The Venceremos Brigade drew a lot of those women through the Great Speckled Bird, which is an underground newspaper here. Elaine will talk more about that. She was one of the people who went on the Venceremos Brigade. And they formed two women's collectives called Upstairs Downstairs. And those women were the key people who helped ALFA form. So we'll, you know, other people can talk more about some of the other pieces that went into that. But so that's where I come from. And as I was in graduate school, I started connecting through actually a food buying club in the Five Points area with some of those women and WRFG, and then worked for the Great Speckled Bird for a while. So that's how I got connected with them and with ALFA forming. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And without further ado, Elaine Kolb is our next speaker. She's also an ALFA co-founder who participated, as Lorraine mentioned, in the Venceremos Brigade. She also was involved with Women's Song Theater, Lesbian Women on WRFG, and more. So Elaine, please join us and share your memories of ALFA now.
Well, you said I have 5 minutes, so I'll share what I can. It'll be easier to share 5 hours, let me tell you. 50 years. That's half a century. Wow. Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I have been like recycling memories and looking at things and digging things out of boxes. Wow. Well, people ask, why did you move to Atlanta? And I say, well, I moved to Atlanta from the University of Buffalo, New York, after I graduated, by way of Cuba. I went to Cuba on the 3rd Vince Brigade, and that was in 1970. And I met people, women, from Atlanta. And this is another whole story. The short of it is, I was the only one that was out as a lesbian on the 3rd Brigade in Cuba. And the women from Atlanta were some of the few people that were nice to me. So it was kind of complicated. But anyway, so there. And so when things fell apart for me in Buffalo and I had to go someplace, I decided, and I had no money and no job, I put together enough money for a one-way bus ticket.
Oh, it's no way.
And I headed to Atlanta. But I was afraid that they wouldn't want me. So I didn't tell anybody I was coming. And when I arrived and tried to call the only number I had, they had moved. Back in those days, though, we had phone books. Remember phone books? Yeah. We had phone books and stuff, and I looked up the Great Speckled Bird. And I went to the Great Speckled Bird, and I figured, somebody will let me crash on a couch or something till I can find my friends. And that's pretty much what happened. And so I ended up living at the Ruby Fruit Jungle, which was one of the communes there. And then after that, we, wow. We started ALFA. And the enormity of having other activist lesbians to relate to. Nowadays, most of the young people today can't imagine how isolated we were, how desperate we were, and how amazing it was when you found one or two, or my goodness, 3, all in the same room, and we could talk, and we could do things and plan things together. Woohoo! So anyway, we need to share our stories. We need to share our stories. We need to share them amongst ourselves. We especially need to share them with the younger people today, all kinds of younger people today, because the younger people today are so much like we were back then. It was very intense times. These are very intense times. Somehow we survived it. We found others. We banded together. We helped each other. That's the only way any of us ever survive. We need to share the message. Hold on to the magic of maybe. So anyway, I had been connected with a radio station back at the University of Buffalo. And so when I got to Atlanta and I said, oh, wow, WRFG, Radio Free Georgia, woohoo! I got my 3rd class FCC license. They don't even have those anymore. But that was back in the day when you had a turntable on either side and you queued up the records. Do you know what records are? I know most of us here are old enough to remember that, but the young ones today go, oh yeah, I heard of them. I've seen a few. Anyway, so this is just what we're doing here is essential. What we are continuing to do is essential. Lesbian women were so powerful. I won't say it was the first, but by golly, there weren't that many radio programs anywhere in the world that used the term lesbian. And we did. And then woman song theater. Oh my goodness. It didn't last for long, but wow, it was bright. It was beautiful. It was just so amazing. It was like Laugh-In, only a lesbian Laugh-In. It was hysterical, but also deep. I mean, gutsy, like so that you would like go from one thing to another, like something that was funny, and then, oh my goodness, and that's what we did. And we went all over the place. We went even to, a lot of people don't know this, we went down to the Republican Counter Convention in Miami. Well, that was a trip, let me tell you. And we performed, and there's, in our brochure, there's a picture of us up on stage. You know? We did it. And I still have a notebook that lists some of the programs of WRFG, of Lesbian Woman, some of the things that we played, and also some of the skits that we did with Woman Song Theater. These are the kinds of things that is scattered all over the place among all of us. It's important. Recognize the importance of who you are and what your life has been and what you have learned from the life. And let me say, let us hold on to the magic of maybe. So many people are so discouraged right now. Hold on to the magic of maybe. And together we can make a difference. We always have, and we still can. And I'll leave you with this because I know I'm going over the time I'm supposed to do. I am a charter member of On and On Anonymous. I tend to go on and on and on. But I went to the original Woodstock. And I came up with a saying that I think should be on bumper stickers and buttons. Old hippies never die. We recycle.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That was wonderful. Before we hear from our next two speakers, I have another slideshow to share with you. This is a remembrance of women who were involved in ALFA who have now passed on.
I've been thinking about the world, about the struggle and pain, how we all need to make a change if we are to remain. When at last the earth can blossom forth, life and love of every hue. And if we all try to give a damn, the skies can turn from gray to blue. Can you hear? Can you hear? We'll all be singing for joy, in peace and harmony. Yes, peace and harmony. And when the people aren't hungry, and when the children aren't bruised, when our sisters and brothers can love whomever we choose, when all people of color can be allowed to live equal and free, And when the power of just a few turns into strength for us all. Can you hear? And can you hear? We'll all be singing for joy in peace and harmony. Yes, peace and harmony.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorraine, for putting all of those gorgeous photographs together so that we can remember people. Next, we're welcoming Casey Wildmoon, an early ALFA member and a member of Moral Hazard, to join us and share her memories of ALFA. Casey.
Thanks, Julie. It's a little hard to follow that remembrance of people, so many women that I knew. Yes. Anyway, I was a little bit later member. I probably joined in the late 70s because I came to Atlanta in 1975. It just struck me that of the 4 ALFA members here, I'm the only one of us who was actually born in the South. So here I am, the born in the South. But yes, y'all are still Southerners, trust me. I know. I came into ALFA and to everything that I did through music. It was where my heart was. My dad was a bluegrass bass player. His gigantic double bass is sitting in my bedroom right now. I have no idea how to play it without frets, but I will one day. And so I ran away from home in Tennessee, where I'm from, to come down here and be a musician. And it wasn't working out real good until I met up with a bunch of women. Hello, Phyllis Free and Beth York, who are in here. And we formed a band called Anima Rising and played around quite a bit. It was really a lot of fun. And then I kind of found myself there. And I did a lot of theater. I was also on WRFG. My show was called Still Ain't Satisfied. And I also started working at the Great Speckled Bird. I wrote music reviews for the Bird when I first got here. And then I did theater. And it was the theater and the music that brought me to Moral Hazard with another couple of ALFA members, Jan Gibson, who was our singer and our primary writer, and Jane Black, who was our drummer. And Jane also was a member of Red Dyke Theater, which was, I wish I could have seen Red Dyke Theater. They sound truly amazing, but that was another bunch of ALFA dykes that was running around there. So it was terrific. It was terrific. But Moral Hazard came about because Jan and I had performed in a women's production that was directed by an actress called Grace McEachran that you could possibly know as Grace Zabriskie. And it was an all-women show, the name of which I can't even remember, but Jan was in it and I was in it, and there were mimes and dancers and all kinds of other stuff. And Jan was reading her poetry, and she was so alive when she did this. It was just an amazing thing. And then she had some songs that were really quite good, but she wasn't as good a guitar player, so she had to pay more attention to it. And I suggested that maybe I play guitar so that she could sing, and turned out that worked. And one night we were at a bar called the Sports Page, which I'm sure some of you may remember. And it was in 1980, and we had all were watching as the presidential election was about to happen, and it was Ronald Reagan versus Jimmy Carter. And Jan and I were sitting in this bar, and we were looking at some TV stuff with the election going on, and we looked at each other and said, he's gonna win, isn't he? Yeah. And there's nothing we can do about it, is there? Nah. Okay, let's form a rock and roll band. And that's how Moral Hazard happened. And it was me and Jan and Jane, and we found a bass player named JB Sapp, who was a little reluctant to join us a little bit, just a little bit. She used to joke that she would be in a shower curtain on stage. But we weren't a band to begin with. We were a theater group, and we performed late night shows at Seven Stages Theater and Little Five Points, and invited all our friends, most of whom were ALFA members, or at least ALFA adjacent. And we're quite concerned about whether or not anybody was actually going to come to see us. The first night we were performing, it was after a Chekhov play called Mother Courage, which is excruciatingly long. And so we didn't get to start at 11, which was our supposed time start. It was more like 12. And we were at Karis Books across the street waiting to be told we could come in and go on, and on the first night. And our stage manager told us to come take a look outside. And so we came up to the windows and we looked outside, and there was the Seven Stages door was right in the middle of the block at Moreland Avenue. And there were people literally lined all the way down around Eat Your Vegetables, the vegetarian restaurant that we all knew and loved at the time. And so we were sold out and quite nervous about it, but we performed. That show was called Moral Hazard 101, and a second show called Signals from Sheba. And then Seven Stages asked us to do a benefit concert and just play music. And we discovered that people like to dance to us. So that was shocking. And so we actually did some stuff for ALFA at that point. And I was on the committee that helped put together ALFA's 10th birthday party in 1982. And Moral Hazard performed at that. And we also introduced to the world the Atlanta Lesbian Feminist Chorus at that show, which was huge. And it was so Linda Vaughn, the director of the chorus, and all the wonderful members. It was truly a wonderful event to have at a strange little venue on North Highland Avenue. But that's where I came from, in the music and the theater aspect of it. And ALFA was always supportive and welcoming to that aspect of everything. And we certainly didn't shy away from that in our music either. In fact, I could tell you this, I don't think I've ever told anybody, but one time, and I can't even remember the name of it now, but a record company actually wanted to sign us. And I don't remember who it was, and we were kind of excited, but then they said, but we need you to tone it down just a little bit. And we all looked around at each other and went, nah, forget it. So we recorded our own selves and never had a record contract, but it was fine. We loved it, and we loved performing for women and even men who liked us, and loved having ALFA as being a real heart of where we came from.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Casey. I just want to lift up for folks who aren't monitoring the chat, because you're so riveted by everyone's stories, that Diane messaged, who is from WRFG, and they're working on a history of the station's 50 years in 2023. And Diane's email is linked in here if anyone would like to reach out to her. I'll also note that we will be putting up the full video on the Sinister Wisdom YouTube channel and sinisterwisdom.org/SW124. And on our webpage, we'll have both the video and the chat transcript. So finally, we're going to hear from Maria Elena Dolan. She's also an early ALFA member and a prominent activist in the queer Atlanta community. Maria Elena, please join us now.
Okay. As you said, my name is Maria Elena Dolan, and I didn't know that we were going to be having 5 minutes to do what we're going to do, because this is, an exposition of 30 minutes. But so how did I get to ALFA? I came down to the south to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, to go to grad school. And I didn't know that if you had a professor that wanted to have you blow him in exchange for a pass grade, and he would give you a fail grade if you didn't. Well, I didn't. And so I flunked out of grad school. And then I'm like, well, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And my girlfriend had come down from the Northeast. We came to Atlanta for a weekend. We went to the ALFA house. There was a party going on. I played poker and I won, which I'm a terrible poker player. So I said, this is a sign. We must move to Atlanta. And as soon as we did that, you know, we put everything, our meager possessions and my motorcycle into a U-Haul, and we U-Hauled it into Atlanta. So that's a variation on the lesbian U-Haul story. But ALFA was so eye-opening and so much where I didn't even know I wanted to be, but I found it. Here were women who are living their politics, you know, working on all kinds of what we call intersectionality now, you know, different, you know, we had the anti-war, and we had the women's movement, and we had the gay movement, that's what we called it, and then the lesbian and gay movement, and then lesbian feminism, and, you know, women's arts, women's everything. And we also were working on relationships that were not based on a model of possession. And that was hard because there weren't a lot of guideposts, but it was something that we were doing that we believed was differentiating ourselves from patriarchal culture, which is true. So, and I'm just going to throw out a lot of stuff. I was one of the women who was willing to work with men in various venues. And whether that was organizing for the 3rd Southeastern Conference for Lesbian Gay Men, or for the 2 first national marches on Washington, the one in '79 and the one in '87. Actually, the one in '87 was fun. I got arrested on the steps of the Supreme Court for being civilly disobedient. And half the women who were there from Atlanta were ALFA. I call them ALFAs. Let's see. Yeah, it was just that DIY feminism that I got, you know, that you could, whatever you could dream up, you could make happen, you know. Like Lucina's music, you know, I was in the co-founding of that. You know, we wanted to make it possible to have dyke musicians to be here and to do their art for people. Let's see, it's, you know, I organized a lot of prides, you know, the first ones. And one of the things, you know, is taking these ALFA guidelines, whatever, working with these men. And a lot of times we would organize a week of programs so that every night there was something queer that you could go to. And one of them, of course, was always ALFA open house, and restricted to women. You know, we tell them, no, you can't come in here. And guys didn't like it, but there it was. One of the other things that I worked on was the Sisters of No Mercy. And this was a women's feminist theater troupe. And we did feminist theater. And some of it we wrote, which had a lot of dyke stuff in it. Myself and Gail Reeder were the main writers for the group. And we also did guerrilla theater. so we started a group called SLAW, which is Southern Ladies Against Women. And, you know, there was a lot of political work there. I'm also, with a couple of other women and men, one of the co-founders of the Atlanta Lesbian and Gay History Project. I'm sorry, History Thing. Yes, the History Thing is what we always referred to. And we eventually came to terms with having collections that included lesbian stuff and making sure that there are also people of color in it. You know, just queer history in Atlanta is a big deal. Let's see what else I'm thinking. The Amelia Earhart Memorial Coven is one of the women's religions things. I had been in a coven when I was in high school, but it was mixed. And so to come here and do lesbian spirituality, feminist spirituality, was just beyond belief. You know, it took us, members of it, into so many directions, but all with this overarching vision of matriarchy and possibilities, what women together can do. Eventually, it morphed into the Dykes of Dungeness, which is good. Margot George and I were founders of, co-founders of Women in the Trades, you know. And what that was a support group for women in non-traditional jobs. You know, hard hats and people who turned wrenches and did things with voltmeters, you know, just anything that women had not traditionally been able to do. I worked in my union, and I was an out lesbian there, and I got a lot of shit, but you know, you just do what you can do. And now I've done things like I gave a talk at the Bremen on pink triangles and black triangles. The pink triangle people know about. It's the gay men who were swallowed up in the Holocaust in Germany. And the black triangles were the people who were asocial. And a lot of different groups, you know, street people that were involved, but lesbians were black triangles. And, you know, you eradicated that with what they called the useless eaters, you know. Everything is just so hooked together. In fact, one of the things I did was form the Georgia Lesbian Eco-Feminists for Animal Rights. A lot of things packed in there. And we had a presence at the National Lesbian Conference. And in that year, we marched in Pride, and one of our chants was "Eat pussy, not cows." You know, anything that you could envision, you could make happen. And that, to me, was ALFA's biggest legacy, and that's what ALFA gave me. And so I tried to give back. I tried to do work that incorporates ALFA principles, and then I would come back and report to ALFA, and I would get support there and ideas about things to see things through. And I'm just thankful that ALFA was there and gave me these possibilities. So.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. It sparked a number of people sharing memories in the chat. We're going to have just a couple minutes for questions. So if you have them, put them in the chat. I want to share one final slideshow, which shows the many wide-ranging political, social, and creative activities that ALFA members were involved in. In the slideshow, you'll see photographs from softball tournaments, protests, marches, and impromptu social gatherings. So now I'm going to share our final slideshow, and then we'll take a question or two.
The time is now to take our rights. Keep marching on, we won't give up the fight. The time is here to make us sound. We won't be silent, we won't back down. When will it be considered a crime to bash our heads and make us frown? In this sea of fear, the sea of strife, forcing us under, robbing our lives. The time is now to take our rights. Keep marching on, we won't give up the fight. The time is here to make us sound. We won't be silent, we won't back down. When will it be unacceptable to deny us of the rights we owed, to keep us out of the dwelling place and off this state of human race? The time is now to take our rights. Keep marching on, we won't give up the fight. The time is here.
Thank you, and thank you again to Lorraine for pulling together all of these photos and helping us make this happen. Do we have any questions, comments, or reflections from the panelists? We have about a minute or two before we go into our final collective dance number.
Well, I can say this. Elaine put something in the comments. There's a lot of people we didn't mention. You know, I know I left out and didn't get to a lot of folks. So please don't feel bad if that happened to you. It's just so much to cover, and we didn't have the time to get everybody in. But I know that Elaine was one example, so was Corinne Smith, of early ALFA members who were songwriters and singers and musicians who never like recorded records or anything, but they created music from their lives and experience and songs. And I wanted to mention that because Elaine, you know, we know that you have a history starting in ALFA, but going way, way to the present day of using your song and your writing in the service of the movements that you're involved in. And so you and Corinne were people that were the two, you know, beginning experience I had of how music could be a direct link with your life and your struggles, both political and social, but also helping you live and be happy. It was a wonderful combination. So.
Thank you all. It's such a pleasure. Many people are saying in the chat, this is a great trip down memory lane. They're also chiming in with their own memories, things that made ALFA really special to them. I want to remind everyone there's another program celebrating all of the ALFA goodness on Thursday. Lorraine put a link in the chat, so you can scroll through the chat and see that there. You can also Google it. It's being hosted by Georgia State as a part of their programming. I thank you all. I also want to acknowledge Rose Norman, who's in the audience, who's been a catalyst for capturing many of these stories, not only ALFA, but throughout the lesbian South as a part of the Southern Lesbian Feminist Activist Herstory Project. As regular attendees of Sinister Wisdom know, we have a final dance song. Oh, my 2 announcements before. The video for this evening's event will go on the Sinister Wisdom YouTube channel, as will the 3 slideshows that we did. Many people commented that they went too fast. Like many, we always like good things to go by quickly. You can revisit them again and again and again on YouTube starting tomorrow. And we will also have up this full video from when I started the video on our YouTube channel and at sinisterwisdom.org/SW124. Now on to our final dance number. It's the L Word by Carol Kramer, performed by Your Girlfriend and produced by Esther Records. Listen to the music, stand up, dance, and we will highlight videos. When the music ends, I end the Zoom call. Sadly, even great evenings like this must come to an end. It's been a pleasure sharing it with you. Now, please join us and dance so we can turn on your video so we can spotlight you enjoying yourself. Thank you all. See you next time.